One was found hiding in a hole in the ground. One was burned alive by his own order. One's final words were recorded as he bled out from a failed suicide. This is how every powerful dictator died, and almost none of them saw it coming. Let's get into it. Adolf Hitler. We're starting with the collapse of the Third Reich itself. By early 1945, Adolf Hitler's world was falling apart in every direction. The Red Army was closing in from the east, the Western Allies were pushing from the west, and Germany itself lay in ruins. Still, he refused to surrender, clinging to increasingly delusional hopes, from a surprise counterattack in the Ardennes to a fantasy that the US and Britain would suddenly turn on the Soviets after Roosevelt's death that April. None of it materialized. On April 20th, his 56th birthday, Hitler made his final appearance above ground, handing out medals to teenage soldiers in the Reich Chancellery Garden. It was the last daylight he would ever see. By April 23rd, Berlin was completely surrounded, and Hitler retreated into the Führer bunker, his underground command center, as reports from the front grew catastrophic. Generals disobeying orders, fleeing outright, or secretly trying to negotiate surrender behind his back. Feeling betrayed, he stripped Himmler and Göring of power. On the night of April 28th, he married his longtime companion Eva Braun in a hurried civil ceremony inside the bunker. The next day, word reached him that Mussolini had been captured and executed by Italian partisans, and Hitler made it clear he intended to avoid the same fate. On April 30th, 1945, with Soviet troops barely 500 meters from the bunker, Hitler shot himself. Eva bit down on a cyanide capsule beside him. Following his explicit instructions, their bodies were carried to the garden, doused in gasoline, and burned as artillery shells exploded nearby. His propaganda chief, Joseph Goebbels, briefly took control of the government and took his own life the very next day. Berlin surrendered on May 2nd. Hitler's dental records were the only remains ever positively identified. It wasn't until 1956 that a German court finally issued an official death certificate. Benito Mussolini. Which brings us to the man whose own death Hitler was so desperate not to repeat. Mussolini's downfall might be the strangest of any dictator on this list. In 1943, his own government turned on him, removing him from power and placing him under arrest. Germany, however, staged a rescue and installed him as a puppet leader over a small territory in northern Italy called the Republic of Salo. By 1945, that puppet state was collapsing. Italian partisans, backed by the advancing Allies, were closing in on northern Italy. Mussolini and his companion, Clara Petacci, attempted a secret escape towards Switzerland, hoping to eventually reach Spain, where fellow fascist dictator Francisco Franco was still firmly in power. They never made it. Near Lake Como, communist partisans intercepted their convoy and identified Mussolini. The following day, he and Petacci were executed by firing squad. The shooter's identity still disputed, though most historians point to a partisan commander known as Walter Audizio. What happened next turned execution into spectacle. Their bodies were transported to Milan, dumped in a public square, kicked and spat on by crowds, and then strung upside down from the metal beams of a service station roof while civilians below hurled stones at the corpses. It remains one of the most brutal public desecrations of a fallen leader in modern history. Saddam Hussein. From a body hanging in a square to a man found hiding in a hole, Saddam Hussein's ending was just as theatrical, just slower to arrive. After being accused by the US of harboring weapons of mass destruction, Iraq was invaded by a US-led coalition in 2003. The Iraqi government and military disintegrated within 3 weeks, and by early April, coalition forces controlled most of the country. When Baghdad fell, visually marked by the toppling of his statue, Saddam was already gone, vanished into hiding as his regime crumbled around him. The US issued a deck of most wanted playing cards to help troops identify regime officials, with Saddam as the ace of spades. Bounties followed, $25 million for him, $15 million each for his sons. He evaded capture until December, when a soldier spotted a rope half buried near a small mud hut. Pulling it revealed a styrofoam-covered trap door leading to an underground hideout. Saddam emerged and surrendered, reportedly announcing, "I am the president of Iraq, and I want to negotiate." He was held and eventually tried, found guilty of crimes against humanity on November 5, 2006. Despite requesting execution by firing squad, Arguing it was more fitting for a former commander-in-chief, his request was denied. Saddam Hussein was hanged on December 30th, 2006. Footage of the execution, secretly filmed on a cell phone, leaked online within hours. Nicolae Ceaușescu. If Saddam's downfall took years, Nicolae Ceaușescu's took days. His government in Romania was considered one of the most repressive in the entire Eastern Bloc, and in 1989, the Romanian people finally rose up against it. The breaking point came on December 17th, when police and military forces opened fire on anti-government demonstrators. Despite a total press blackout, word spread by mouth and underground radio. Ceaușescu, apparently misreading the public mood entirely, called a mass rally for December 21st to address the unrest directly. About 8 minutes into his speech, the crowd began booing and shouting him down. He briefly regained control by raising his hand for silence, but lost it again moments later and fled inside. Bucharest erupted into open revolt. The military initially restored order overnight, but by morning the uprising had spread nationwide. After his defense minister's death, believed by soldiers at the time to be a murder, nearly the entire army defected to the revolution. Ceaușescu attempted one final address to the crowd outside the Central Committee building, but was forced to retreat under a barrage of thrown stones. He and his wife, Elena, escaped by helicopter from the rooftop, seconds ahead of demonstrators reaching the top floor, only to be forced down by the military, which had locked down all airspace. On Christmas Day, December 25, 1989, the couple was tried by a military tribunal and sentenced to death. Ceaușescu denied the court's legitimacy until the end, insisting he remained Romania's legal president. It changed nothing. Both were executed by firing squad within minutes of the verdict, their bodies struck by over 100 rounds. Hideki Tojo. Now to a death that almost wasn't one, recorded in real time in the dictator's own words. Hideki Tojo, Japan's prime minister through most of World War II, faced arrest after Japan's unconditional surrender in 1945. General Douglas MacArthur ordered the detention of 40 suspected war criminals, Tojo among them. When American soldiers surrounded his home on September 11th, Tojo shot himself in the chest, but missed his heart. As he bled, 2 Japanese reporters recorded his words. He apologized for taking so long to die, called the war justified and righteous, expressed sorrow for the suffering of Asia's peoples, and said he would await history's judgment. American soldiers managed to resuscitate him on the spot. He was transported to Sugamo prison, tried and convicted on multiple counts of war crimes. Tojo was hanged on December 23, 1948, 1 week before what would have been his 64th birthday. In his final statement, he apologized for the atrocities committed under Japan's military and specifically asked the United States to extend compassion to the Japanese civilians who had endured devastating firebombing campaigns and 2 atomic bombings. Joseph Stalin. From a death broadcast in real time to one shrouded in suspicion for decades, Joseph Stalin's final years were a portrait of paranoia eating itself alive. His health was already failing badly by the early 1950s, so much so that he spent nearly 5 months on extended retreats at his dacha in 1950 and again in 1951. True to form, his paranoia never let up, not even toward the people meant to keep him alive. In January 1952, he had a doctor imprisoned simply for suggesting he retire for his health, and he later launched the infamous Doctor's Plot, a fabricated conspiracy accusing physicians of scheming to assassinate top Soviet officials. On March 1, 1953, his staff found him semi-conscious on his bedroom floor. He was moved to a couch where he remained for 3 days, spoon-fed and given various medications, his condition steadily worsening until his death on March 5th. An autopsy attributed it to a cerebral hemorrhage, worsened by severe arterial damage from atherosclerosis. When his body was put on public display, the crowds were so massive and disorganized that a deadly crush broke out among mourners. His death has never fully escaped conspiracy. Some historians and contemporaries believe he was either poisoned or deliberately left to die without prompt medical care by members of his own inner circle, most notably Lavrentiy Beria, head of the Soviet secret police. Mao Zedong. Stalin's death was kept from public knowledge until it was unavoidable. and Mao Zedong's followed nearly the same pattern, decades later and a continent away. In his final years, Mao, a heavy, lifelong chain smoker, was quietly battling a cascade of serious illnesses, including heart and lung disease, with some accounts suggesting Parkinson's or ALS, though those remain unconfirmed. The Chinese government kept the full extent of his decline a tightly guarded secret. In 1976, his condition spiraled fast. A heart attack in March, another in June, and a third on September 2nd that left him completely incapacitated. He never recovered, dying a week later on September 9, 1976, at age 82. When his embalmed body was displayed publicly, an estimated 1 million people filed past to view it. Mao had requested cremation, a request the government overruled entirely. Instead, his body remains permanently preserved and on display in a mausoleum where Chinese citizens continue to pay their respects to this day. Pol Pot. From a regime that preserved its leader's body forever to one that ended in pure betrayal, Pol Pot's final year reads like a slow-motion implosion. By the late 1990s, the architect of Cambodia's genocidal regime was losing his grip entirely. In June 1997, he ordered, or at minimum enabled, the assassination of his longtime ally, Son Sen, along with 13 of Son Sen's family members and aides. Trust within the Khmer Rouge evaporated almost overnight. One senior commander, Ta Mok, suspecting he might be next on the list, struck first, rallying loyal troops, denouncing Pol Pot as a traitor to the cause, and forcing him to flee on foot, so physically frail by that point that he had to be carried. He didn't get far. Ta Mok's forces caught him and placed him under house arrest. While confined, Pol Pot gave his final interview to American journalist Nate Thayer, insisting his conscience was clear and that everything he'd done was for his country, not personal power, while openly downplaying the genocide's death toll as exaggerated. In July, surviving Khmer Rouge leadership held a show trial and publicly sentenced him to life imprisonment. Then, on April 15, 1998, Pol Pot died in his sleep. The official cause was listed as a heart attack, but people present at the time believed he had taken his own life with a cocktail of Valium and chloroquine, just after learning Ta Mok intended to hand him over to the Americans. Fidel Castro. From a sudden death to one of the slowest fades on this entire list, Fidel Castro spent his final decade outliving almost everyone's expectations, including his own enemies. In the summer of 2006, the face of the Cuban Revolution fell seriously ill with intestinal bleeding, requiring emergency surgery. For the first time in nearly 5 decades, he handed over power, at first temporarily, to his brother, Raul Castro. Over the following years, Fidel gradually withdrew from the public stage entirely, officially stepping down in 2008, stating plainly that the job demanded more energy than he had left to give. Raul assumed the presidency, though Fidel remained a consulted voice on major decisions behind the scenes. His health continued to decline through the years that followed, the details largely kept private by the Cuban government, though persistent rumors pointed to diverticulitis. On the night of November 25, 2016, Fidel Castro died in Havana at age 90. His official cause of death was never disclosed. One detail that's almost hard to believe: he reportedly survived dozens of assassination plots. Some estimates claim hundreds, though the exact number remains disputed. Augusto Pinochet. Unlike Castro's slow fade, Augusto Pinochet's end was sudden, and the public reaction to it split a nation right down the middle. On the morning of December 3, 2006, Chile's former dictator suffered a heart attack. His house arrest, the legal restriction he'd lived under for years over human rights charges, was lifted, and on December 10th he was rushed to intensive care. Just hours later, he died of congestive heart failure and pulmonary edema at age 91, surrounded by family in a Santiago military hospital. The reaction across Chile was immediate and deeply polarized. Thousands poured into the streets, some celebrating, others mourning. When his body lay in state at the military academy the next day, the divide turned physical. The grandson of a general murdered under Pinochet's regime spat on the coffin and was beaten by furious Pinochet loyalists on the spot. Francisco Franco. From a death that split a country to one that had been carefully engineered for years in advance, Francisco Franco didn't just die. He planned the transition of power around it. By the early 1970s, Spain's longtime dictator was visibly nearing the end. He'd already locked in his succession plan, formally naming Prince Juan Carlos his successor back in 1969. After a prolonged illness, Franco died on November 20th, 1975 at age 82, a date carrying heavy symbolic weight, falling exactly 39 years after the death of José Antonio Primo de Rivera, founder of Spain's fascist Falange movement. Some accounts suggest he may have actually died the evening before, with the official announcement simply delayed. Juan Carlos was proclaimed King of Spain almost immediately, setting the country on its path toward democracy. The story didn't end there, though. In 2019, over 40 years after his original burial, Spain's socialist government ordered his remains exhumed, on the grounds that only Civil War victims should remain interred at the Valley of the Fallen, and that Franco's presence there was a lasting insult to those buried around him. His family fought the decision and lost. He was reburied at Mingo Rubio Cemetery instead. Banned from being draped in the official Spanish flag, his coffin was covered with a nationalist flag by his grandson instead. Josip Broz Tito. And finally, the death that brought together more world leaders in one place than almost any funeral in history. In his final years, Josip Broz Tito gradually stepped back from the daily governance of Yugoslavia, delegating more authority to his prime minister after 1974, while still retaining final say over major decisions. By 1979, his health was failing fast. Severe circulation problems in his legs led to 2 hospital admissions in Ljubljana in January 1980 alone. Doctors recommended amputating his left leg due to blocked arteries. Tito refused outright, and according to his own aide, threatened to take his own life if anyone attempted it, prompting staff to quietly remove his firearm out of genuine concern he'd follow through. Eventually, after a private conversation with his sons, he relented. The amputation went ahead, but by then, infection had already spread too far. Tito died on May 4, 1980, at age 87. His funeral became a singular moment in Cold War history. Representatives from well over 120 countries attended, spanning both sides of the Iron Curtain, making it the largest state funeral the world had seen up to that point. And there you have it, 12 of history's most powerful dictators, and 12 completely different ways the end finally caught up with them. Bullets, betrayal, disease, suicide, and in more than one case, sheer paranoia turned in on itself. Power, it turns out, has never once bought anyone a peaceful ending. Which one of these deaths shocked you the most? Drop it in the comments below. And if you want a part 2, because there are a few more, even crazier ones I didn't have room for here, let me know down there too.